Trump is destroying democracy. The democracy in which Joe Biden's administration created a category called domestic violent terrorists for people that were hesitant about vaccines. What is the democracy that Trump is destroying then? Hello, you awakening wonders. Remember, we stream at these times. We'll be back from June the 9th with a fantastic all-new show. Join us if you are serious about freedom. If all you care about is tribalism and hearing your own views reiterated, there's many content creators for you, both inside the legacy media and outside. But we are interested in real freedom. That's why we're bringing you today the story that seems to suggest that from the beginning, the COVID pandemic was an opportunity to mobilize state authority against the citizens that they continually claim to protect. If it's true that the Biden administration created a new category called domestic violent extremists, which, by the way, appears to be designed to sound like domestic violence, an appalling crime that's difficult to discuss and extremely taboo. Since becoming director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard has released files that suggest that the Biden administration worked in legion with social media to ensure that people were labeled as essentially terrorists simply for being cynical about a medical product, if indeed it is a medical product, about which they should have been cynical from the beginning. Let's get into it. First of all, here's Tulsi Gabbard talking about these disclosures.
When you look at the language of these documents that I've declassified, first, the strategic implementation plan of the Biden administration's designation of potential violent domestic extremists, it really talks about people who may likely turn out to be domestic violent extremists, or those who may likely turn to violence because of these specific quote-unquote ideologies that they hold. And there's a consistent thread through here that these ideologies that they are designating as turning into potentially violent activities or being manifested in violent activities happen to be those of people who were using their First Amendment rights to oppose certain policies of the Biden administration. And while some of the examples that are focused on there have to do with those who opposed the COVID vaccine mandates, those who opposed the mask mandates, parents who were concerned that their children going to school may be forcibly vaccinated with the COVID vaccine without the consent or awareness of parents. The list goes on, but it's not exclusive to this. In some of these reports that we've declassified, it shows that people who were opposed to Biden's border policy, for example, could therefore have propensities to join a militia or could become these domestic violent extremists that we're talking about here. And again, it's important to look at this in the totality and the sequence of how this happened. These documents were issued in December of 2021. You remember very well, Will, the speech, the ominous speech that President Biden gave in 2022, where with this red background and Marines standing in the background, he issued an address to the nation warning the American people that Donald J. Trump and MAGA Republicans pose a direct threat to the fabric of our republic. And then you put that together with how the FBI and others within the Biden administration directed social media companies to censor Americans and undermine our First Amendment rights because, of course, the social media companies don't want to be in a position to support the spread of domestic violent extremism. So when you look at all of these things together, you understand at its core the thing that I committed to the American people to root out, which is the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community and national security state against the American people.
This is some reporting from Public and Catherine Herridge reports. The Biden administration labeled Americans who oppose the COVID-19 vaccination and mask mandates as domestic violent extremists, or DVEs, according to newly declassified intelligence records. The designation created an articulable purpose for FBI or other government agents to open an assessment of individuals, which is often the first step towards a formal investigation, said a former FBI agent. The report, which the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has declassified, claims that anti-government or anti-authority violent extremists, specifically militias, characterize COVID-19 vaccination and mask mandates as evidence of government overreach. A sweeping range of COVID narratives narratives, the report states, have resonated with DVEs motivated by QAnon. I've told you many times now that we live in a system designed to criminalize people that it disagrees with. This is a perfect example. Your cynicism, your skepticism, your doubt about mask mandates, social distancing, lockdowns, the efficacy of the vaccines and vaccine side effects and injuries have been turned into a kind of crime. In fact, they were preemptively criminal. All the while that we were making social media content, questioning those mandates, questioning the intelligence and motives of Pfizer, Moderna, and the numerous other corporate and state entities that benefited from us taking those vaccines, that censored us, that ensured our compliance, have now been proven to be part of a broader, clandestine government arrangement. Isn't that extraordinary? The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the National Counterterrorism Center, that's the NCTC, co-authored the December the 13th, 2021 intelligence product, whose title reads, DVEs and foreign analogues may react violently to COVID-19 mitigation mandates. Get ready for this, because this is pretty interesting, because every single thing here turned out to be true. You were on the right side of history, not the wrong side of history. Even if you end up on the wrong side of bars, it doesn't mean you're not telling the truth. The report cites criticism of mandates as prominent narratives related to violent extremism, include the belief that COVID-19 vaccines are unsafe. Oh, well, that's true, especially for children. That's true. A part of a government or global conspiracy to deprive individuals of their civil liberties. Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat. Or are designed to start a new social or political order. Again, let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat. What do you think about this post by Bill Gates? Vaccines in food are an effective way of overcoming vaccine hesitancy. Note the comment underneath. Yeah, like putting roofies in someone's drink is a sure way to bypass the codes of sexual morale that are required in order to charm or seduce somebody into bed. The normalization and industrialization at a global scale of what I would consider to be their terrorist techniques is truly abominable. Let me know if you agree with that in the comments and chat. It's a way they could go to social media companies and say, you don't want to propagate domestic terrorism, so you should take down this content. Let me know in the comments and chat if you had content taken down during the pandemic period. How did Facebook behave? How did Twitter, as it was then, behave? How did Google, Alphabet, YouTube, Google, Alphabet, ABC, got so many names. They're trying to obfuscate responsibility even by being difficult to locate and nebulous at the level of their name and who they are. You try speaking to someone on YouTube, it's impossible. That's why you should always join us on Rumble and Rumble Premium. Click the link in the description. Become a member of Rumble Premium. Support us. What we're doing here is important and valuable. We are fighting a war and we need you. At the same time, the report urges agents not to violate the First Amendment. Some DVEs employ a number of techniques, the document says, some of which may be criminal, whereas others may constitute the exercise of rights protected by the US Constitution. But, said friend, the only way they could become aware you're engaged in wrongthink as they define it by their own definition of anti-government and anti-authority violent extremism is to monitor your First Amendment activities or have them reported to you. Friend called the approach pre-crime. Of course, that's a reference to the film Minority Report, where we were all criminalized by technology.
I'm sure you all understand the legalistic drawback to pre-crime methodology.
Here we go again.
Look, I'm not with the ACLU on this, Jeff. But let's not kid ourselves. We are arresting individuals who have broken no law.
But they will.
Note how sport has changed since the advent of technology of this scale. Every pass, every movement, a heat map of where a player appears on the field. Now, anything from any point in life can be reconfigured and reformed and reframed and reimagined as crime. That's why Lucy Connolly in the UK is in jail right now, because she said something inappropriate. It was inappropriate. Inappropriate is different from crime. Do you understand? There are moral and ethical areas where moral and ethical conduct has to be judged according to moral and ethical law. Side note, that suggests there is a God and an absolute truth, doesn't it? Let me know. Otherwise, what? Reason, rational, consensus is the measure by which we determine these things. Clearly, what we're living in is a post-truth age where the systems and institutions in power use their concern and care as leverage for maximal control. That's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. What you need is to be revved up and charged with super potent revolutionary coffee. This will clear your butt out quick, fast. This is a coffee that believes in revolution. If the founding fathers were here today, they'd be drinking this. Alexander Hamilton would be sipping on this stuff. Dear Thomas Jefferson, he'd be downing this. And as for Sam Adams, I reckon he'd be snorting hard lines of it. And at the moment, 1775 Coffee have got a fantastic new deal. They're giving away free starter kits, free bags of coffee, 216 ounces of your choice, and the longevity brand, infused with CA-AKG, the clinically studied compound that actually helps reduce your biological age. When I started this, I was very nearly an elderly man. Now I'm one of those babies. Here I am, look at me. I've just had a couple of cups of it. Oh, I've never felt better. And the deal is simple. You pay the cost of 2 bags of coffee and $17.75 takes care of the rest. That includes the 3rd bag and the gear. This sounds like drugs. Matte black tumbler, a frother, gold scoop, reusable K-cup filter, tourniquet, works. Bang it straight into your... No, it's not. This is not drugs. Go to 1775coffee.com/brand and get your free star kit and caffeinate your soul before someone in a boardroom pulls the plug. These products won't be available forever. It won't be long before the government steps in to stop you having fun. Get them while you can. 1775, baby. Stay free. The document may have been timed to coincide with the end of the 75-day grace period the Biden administration gave government agencies and large private sector employers, and which covered 2/3 of the workforce after announcing sweeping federal vaccine requirements intended to affect as many as 100 million Americans, including private sector employees, healthcare workers, and federal contractors. Remember, it was mandated. You had to take those vaccines. Conversation about those vaccines was shut down and controlled and smeared. So were prominent voices that were outspoken around that subject. If you, like me, never took those vaccines, you were regarded as a criminal then. If you took those vaccines and now regret it, let me know in the comments and chat. This has to be a time of reconciliation, of coming together. People that didn't take the vaccines because they didn't trust it, people that took the vaccines and now regret it, and people that think it's right to take the vaccines, who, by the way, always should have been able to take the vaccines if they wanted to, because that's freedom. Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat. There's little evidence that the report was based on any intelligence other than news reports and social media posts. We live in an age where the media creates the context now. The media creates a context and then they claim that context is the truth. For example, you could start making claims about an individual and then that would provide context for a criminal case. Do you see how that could possibly work? Let me know in the comments. The report suggests the Biden administration's political goals, such as full compliance with the COVID vaccine mandates, drove intelligence collection requirements so that raw data would reinforce, not undercut the policy, versus an open-minded approach to intelligence collection, which seeks the facts on the ground to inform government officials who make policy decisions. During Biden's famous 2022 Red speech, named after the blood red background behind him, he said Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Let's have a look at that now.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
This guy was deep into cognitive decline by this time. Remember that? You weren't allowed to discuss it. You weren't allowed to talk about it. That's just one layer of deception. Look at the outrageous staging of this speech. Look at MSNBC's reporting on it. Do you recognize the world you were living in right there? Now it's been admitted that the Biden administration were deliberately passing legislation and regulation to ensure that people that were cynical about vaccines were regarded as terrorists, when look at their Empire Strikes Back, crazy pseudo-fascistic backdrop. They're the fascists. They always were. Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat.
That the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
Okay, he was lying then, possibly because he was sadly riddled with cancer and plainly in deep, deep senility. But what that demonstrates is that man was not making those decisions, nor was he in a position to. The furious scrambling backlash that the Democrats are experiencing now is an attempt to mask the fact that that man was clearly not empowered to make the decisions he was elected to make. The report goes on to suggest that opponents of COVID vaccine mandates for children may also be DVEs. Well, I'm a DVE, you're a DVE, we're DVEs and proud. We're DVE with glee. You and me. I don't know. Can they turn that into a chant? The simple fact is this. In the vast majority of cases, there's simply no reason to vaccinate children, and it might be no reason under any circumstances. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. The availability of vaccine for all school-aged children might spur conspiracy theories and perceptions that schools will vaccinate children against parents' will and may increase the potential for violence, it states. Other narratives that could trigger violent acts are employees facing termination. That happened. Lack of compliance or perceptions of unfair healthcare treatment for the unvaccinated. A separate February 2022 report called a Special Analysis Joint Analytics Cell, a terrifying name, investigates the socio-political factors amplifying persistent domestic violent extremist threat. It seems to draw a straight line between the anti-vaccine mandates and elevated levels of domestic terrorism. However, a close reading of the statistics reveals that of the 2,950 domestic terrorism cases handled by the FBI, the vast majority were related to the January 6th siege of the US Capitol. Those cases included parading, demonstrating, or picketing the Capitol building, which were not violent or responsible for damage to the Capitol. Oh my God, you terrorists, you're moving about. You're under arrest for that face paint, and you're under arrest for that buffalo hat. You're under arrest for not having a top on. Actually, you're all the same guy, but nevertheless, we can pass a bill now. The declassified reports add a new level of detail about the Biden administration's efforts to marginalize those who oppose the vaccine mandates, what critics call a far-ranging abuse of government power, while demonizing criticism of the vaccine mandate. Newly released records this week from Senator Ron Johnson suggest the administration was censoring valid information about vaccine safety and covering up vaccine risks. Listen to this excellent reporting from Reclaim the Net. Healthcare workers voiced concerns, truckers honked in defiance, parents rallied outside school board meetings. You'd think this would have sparked dialogue in democracy. Instead, it triggered surveillance. Criticize the mandates online? That's an assessment. Refuse to inject your 5-year-old with the brand new pharmaceutical product? Radical tendencies. What emerges from these documents is a portrait of a government that, faced with public hesitancy, chose suppression over dialogue. When your own citizens start asking questions and your first instinct is to start a file on them, you're not governing, you're managing the optics of control. This wasn't a war on extremism. It was a campaign to delegitimize discomfort, an exercise in bureaucratic gaslighting where questioning policy equaled potential radicalization. The real threat, apparently, was always ordinary people who remembered they had the right to say no. What an extraordinary piece of reporting. Normally, you would consider that a perfect point to go out. But when you consider that Joe Rogan just this week had a conversation in which he questioned one report that suggests that America may have lost more people to COVID vaccinations, not COVID the disease, which, by the way, was caused by a lab leak that was likely funded by American taxpayers and possibly was part of a bioweapon research program. That means that whether you were killed by COVID or by the measures introduced to address it, you were likely killed as a result of your own government using your own money to, I don't know what, reduce the population? Let's have a look at that clip.
Sent Jamie this study, VAERS adjusted data, and other derived from the MIT Florida Department of Health study findings that yield a conservative range of 470,000 to 600,000 American deaths from the COVID-19 mRNA shots.
That's it?
More than, well, just that alone. That's a lot of people, man. More than World War I, World War II, and Vietnam combined. If that's true. It indicates Pfizer, this is Pfizer alone, so this is not even Moderna.
Oh, okay.
Pfizer alone likely killed over 470,000 Americans. They found a 36% increase in all-cause mortality among Pfizer recipients versus Moderna.
Yeah, but they saved millions.
Yeah, I keep hearing that.
There you have it. Empirical evidence that your own government and your own media regard you as a criminal, regard your freedom as an inconvenience, and I would say a strong spur for you to become the very radical that they fear most. One who rejects their system, who rejects their lies, and is willing to stand up, fight, and even die for the freedom that is our birthright under God. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. And in the meantime, if you can, stay free. Remember, we stream on Rumble at these times. Get Rumble Premium. Click the link in the description. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.